Hi folks, in today's video we're going to talk about why you may want to consider disinheriting your spouse, and if you do so, they'll thank you. Hi, I'm attorney Paul Bernstein of the Bernstein Law Group. Why would you want to ever consider disinheriting your spouse? Well, let's talk about it. If you left your spouse the inheritance outright, if you pass away first, he or she will receive that inheritance, but then if subsequent to your death they were involved in some situation where they're now being sued, that inheritance is at risk of being lost under that situation. Or what happens frequently, and people are surprised, if their spouse remarries, that inheritance could partially be lost if that remarriage ends up in a divorce, or that spouse may claim an inheritance when your spouse passes away. The law permits that to happen. So there's no protection there from a bad decision if there's a remarriage. Also, by giving it outright to your spouse, when your spouse passes away, there may be an estate tax that otherwise could have been either reduced or completely eliminated. The Massachusetts estate tax. The threshold in Massachusetts is $1 million. You lost an opportunity to shelter up to that first $1 million from estate taxes to maximize the inheritance your children ultimately get, or your intended beneficiaries. And lastly, by quote unquote disinheriting your spouse, you will be able to determine ultimately where that inheritance goes. So how do we go about disinheriting the spouse in a way that haven't cut her truly out of the inheritance, but really given it to her or him in a very protected way? Well, you make sure that that inheritance doesn't go outright to the spouse. You have it go to a very properly designed trust. This trust could actually be one where your spouse is in control of everything in that trust as what we call the trustee. Your spouse can be the beneficiary of that trust. You could have other family members as beneficiaries as well. But your spouse will still be in charge and have full access to everything in that trust. But if drafted properly and maintained properly, if your spouse is ever sued, it provides a significant amount of asset protection so that the inheritance just is afforded so much more protection from lawsuits. In addition, we could put in provisions that would require, if your spouse was going to remarry, that they enter into a prenuptial agreement with their fiancé, so that if it ends up being a bad decision that years down the road that remarriage ends up in divorce, you've protected your spouse from losing half of everything in that divorce. It also, that trust will say upon your spouse's passing that it'll go to your ultimate intended beneficiaries, your children, or whomever you want your part of the inheritance to go. If it went to your spouse, you don't actually know where it would ultimately end up. And lastly, there's estate tax planning we can do to shelter up to $1 million from estate taxes when your spouse passes, if you predecease them. So really important planning can be done by quote and unquote divorcing your spouse. You're really not cutting them out. You're just providing a very an enhanced vehicle so that that inheritance is in a very protected wrapper, but not taking control away from them. I hope you found this information informative. If you have any other questions or just not sure what to do about your estate plan, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.